Welcome to Identity Unboxed, where we provide mentorship and promote representation for Black professionals in the advancement of the Black community.
We are seeking guidance from exceptional Black leaders, scholars, and professionals with expertise in their respective fields.
We hope to foster a space that promotes authenticity, inclusivity, and restoration for our listeners while exploring the intersection of our personal and professional lives.
This project is a culmination of our lived experiences as young Black professionals to transform our life trajectories, to overcome adversity, and reach triumph.
Our intention is to inspire you on your path to discovering your purpose.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Identity Unboxed, Rep. Reed. You represent Washington State's 36th Legislative District, and you've had an extensive career in public service, and we are just super excited and grateful that you're here with us today. And so we'll just jump into the first question. In 2022, you were elected to the Washington State House of Representatives, becoming the first person of color to represent the 36th Legislative District. You were inspired to run by witnessing the struggles of fellow millennials who were conflicted about building longevity in our state due to high costs of housing, childcare, education, and wages that did not keep up with inflation. Can you take us back to the moment you decided to run for office and provide more insight on what motivated this decision?
Yeah, running for office, that decision was so crazy because it happened very quickly. Basically, I ran to fill a vacancy that was created because our state senator in Washington State, every legislative district has 2 state representatives and 1 state senator. And in February or late January of that year, kind of very unexpectedly, our state senator announced that he was not going to be running for reelection in the coming summer cycle. And so our state reps kind of huddled and got together and decided that one of them, Noel Frame, would run for the Senate seat, and then that left an open House seat, which doesn't happen all that often. Open seats are kind of rare. A lot of elected officials in Washington State, for better or for worse, are appointed to their positions to fill vacancies or for other reasons, and then run later. So to run in like a fully open seat for the legislature and doesn't happen that often. It hadn't happened in the 36th district in a while. And I often say, like, in January of that year, like January 1st, it's New Year's Day. I'm looking out over, for this fresh 2022. And I'm like, oh, I have so much to look forward to this year. I have a wonderful, wonderful new boyfriend, and things are going great, and I'm excited about my job and all of these things. And running for office was not on that list on January 1st. It was not even anywhere in the like idea sphere of what could happen that year. And then by like February 5th, I was running for office, and that's what I did for the rest of 2022. So it just goes to show you that kind of unexpected things can come around the corner. But a lot of it was, this announcement was made, it became clear there was going to be a vacancy, and some people that I kind of knew through political work reached out to me and said, like, we think you should run for it, and we want to encourage you to run for this seat. And I've always worked in public service. I'd been involved in political work in Washington, like volunteering on campaigns and with the local Democratic Party groups. And so like I was kind of like, I guess, known in like the universe, but I had never run for office before. And so it was like a really big shift. But it sort of became one of those things where it happened very quickly. I had to make a decision quickly because when you have these openings, you want to be the first person in the race, so that, you can try to like clear the field a little bit. So I talked to my boyfriend, I talked to my therapist, I talked to my parents, I prayed about it a little bit, and I decided that people that loved and cared about me kind of encouraged me to do it. And part of the reason I ultimately decided to do it was also because I was at a place in my life that particular year where it was possible for me to run for office, where I had the financial stability, the professional flexibility, I had a lot of personal support at home. I had just been through 3 years like of weekly therapy, so I felt I was in a very good like mentally healthy space. And I really just decided to myself, there may never be a time in my life when all of these elements are in place for me personally at a time when a seat is also available. And so I should go for this now. And whatever happens, I'm going to have an incredible experience out of running. And if I win, then I'm going to have an opportunity to really make a difference. And so that was a lot of what kind of went into that decision.
I love hearing that. And it's so great that you had champions around you in your community. And it sounds like you really leaned on them for that advice to make that decision. And I was hoping you would take us back a little bit before you decided to run for office, because I know you mentioned you'd been interested in public service before this, you had been volunteering on campaigns. And so, can you tell our audience a little bit more about the impetus behind your passion for public service and what really ignited that in you? And please feel free to go back, during college or before that or
Yeah.
whenever that kind of was sparked.
Yeah, I mean, I think it started really young. I grew up in Seattle. My parents were both working in public schools. So my dad was a teacher. He taught at Washington Middle School for a long time. Sometimes I feel like every person that grew up in Seattle in the 90s like knows him. He just was on a trip in Europe, like in Vienna or something, and he ran into one of his former students on like a train. But anyway, so my dad was a teacher and then later a principal at Cleveland, and my mom worked in special education. So both of my parents had jobs where they were sort of service to the community professionally. And I remember like that kind of being some work in that space, sort of being something I was always interested in. But when I was younger, especially when I was in my teens and my college years, like I had a lot of interests. I wasn't really sure what exactly I was going to end up doing or majoring in or studying. I was interested in English, history. I was a pretty serious theater student when I was younger, and I thought I might be an actor. There were just a lot of things that I wanted to do. And I really wasn't sure. But I kind of came of age during the first Bush administration. During the 9/11 was like my second week in high school. So a lot of those like big geopolitical shifts, whether it's the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, the Bush administration, those changes, a lot of that shaped my teenage life and kind of growing up period. And then when I was in college, I got very interested in Middle Eastern history and started studying Arabic and I did an internship that connected me kind of more deeply to folks in DC who were working on the Israel-Palestine peace process. And I really wanted to work in foreign policy work in the Middle East. That was like my big dream, was to be like national security advisor one day. Um, and then the Trump administration happened when I was in graduate school, and I went to grad school to prepare to serve in the Hillary Clinton administration. And then there was no Hillary Clinton administration. So I moved back to Seattle and I kind of started this whole other career working in local government. And I really fell in love with that work and kind of the ability of local government to really affect people's lives in like a quicker, more direct way than working in federal policy. And so I always wanted to sort of help and be of service and find a way to kind of contribute to my community with the gifts that I had. I think some of that too, like I was raised a Catholic, I'm a practicing Catholic now, and I was really influenced by kind of Catholic social teachings and some of the like kind of great Catholic social reformers like Dorothy Day and Cesar Chavez. And, my faith puts such a strong emphasis on service. And that I think really embedded itself deeply in me. So, sort of a combination of my parents and their work, my personal faith, some kind of serendipitous opportunities where I met some great mentors who sort of helped guide me in directions to kind of use my skills to help others. And then coming into the legislature has just been this like incredible opportunity, because you get to work with so many groups of people where you can really like channel power to organizations and communities that need it, that have great ideas, that have been doing the work, and they just need like a little bit of power. They need a little bit of money. They need someone to like help them take things to the next level. And like the great privilege of being a legislator is like you get to do that and unlock that opportunity for these communities, these organizations, these people. And that's like a wonderful feeling. And, you know, ultimately, like people I like people will often be like, "Oh, like great work, Reprieve on X bill or whatever." But I think like my favorite bills are the ones where it's like I'm working with organized community groups that are really doing a lot of the work and have done a lot of the work, and I'm just sort of like opening that sluice gate. And so that is, and then they're just like cooking. Like I'm just an accessory in in their like greater project work. That's kind of the work that I love about this. So I don't know, that was a long rambling answer to your question, but
No, it's great. I really love hearing that you kind of explored so many different areas before you honed in on the politics. And it sounds like you
yeah,
really just cared about people at the beginning, you know, like you talked about being wanting to be in theater and you study English and you're learning about the stories and history behind, you know, how civilizations come to be. And then it seems like you wanted to be someone that could, you know, instigate positive change. And so you saw that opportunity through getting into local politics. And I think it's important for our listeners to hear that there's so many different avenues into this type of career, because I think a lot of people think, oh, you need to, you know, go right and work in DC and there's a certain path you have to take. But it sounds like yours was a little bit like circuitous in that you just had these values within you and your family that kind of had raised you to be aware of your role in the community, and that you actually acted on that and decided, you know, I can make a change here and also support grassroots efforts, which I think is fabulous. And those community organizations can leverage your position to get some of their needs met too. So that's
yeah,
great.
absolutely. I always tell people, especially young people, when I talk to them, because I was one of those young people who like didn't really know what I wanted to do
Yeah.
and was really anxious about that. And
Right.
it seemed like everyone else was like, "Oh, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to have
Yeah.
this plan." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And you know, I often like to say that the crooked path has its dividends. That you
Yeah.
know, chasing your like really focusing on your building your value set, and then doing the best that you can with whatever you're given, and then trying to follow opportunities as far as they go um is uh is can lead you to places that you just never expected.
I love that. Thank you so much. I love that you, like, I echo what Tiana said, just how you pointed out that you were navigating life and figuring out what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go. And it seems like the universe opened these doors for you to get to where you are today. And I was wondering, you know, it seemed like it was a fast turnaround, like you said. It wasn't, you know, on your radar to do this, and it kind of just fell into place last minute. What was going through your mind once you were elected and it was official after that, you know, run and all that? What just how are you feeling once it was all said and done?
I had honestly a lot of fear. I would joke about it and be like, "Oh, I'm like the dog that caught the car," like ha ha. But I underneath that was like a lot of anxiety. And part of it was like, would I actually like being a legislator? And you know, the I can't remember if it was the year or 2 years before I ran, but, there was another legislator who I knew, Kirsten Harris Talley, who had, resigned from the legislature and then written, like, a pretty public letter about her, like, negative experiences as a Black woman in with working with House leadership and working and being in the House, and why she decided to leave. And I think I had a lot of anxiety that, like, did I just spend a year of my life and like all of my friends and family's money trying to get elected to a job that I'm not gonna like? And what if I get there and I hate it? Or what if I get there and I'm not good at it? And I'm like, do I stick it out 2 years? Do I like try to leave? Like, do I try? So I had a lot of that because even though like I knew what the job was and I knew state legislators and had met them and you know been encouraged by them, you don't really know until you're in it. And so I think when I first got elected, I was very excited. I was very proud. I won, it was a decisive victory. I got a lot of votes. So, and that felt really good because you spend, every waking minute of your day and thinking about it. And so that felt great. And then I was like, okay, what do I do now? Like, how do I navigate this? And what if I don't like it? And I was really fortunate. I got elected with an incredible cohort of legislators, many of whom were also people of color, were kind of around my age, shared a lot of the same politics as me, and had also worked in government or had some kind of like government experience, kind of similar to mine. And so that really was a great gift in that I had this like kind of automatic cohort when I started, and we became quite close, and really supported each other and lifted each other up, and helped each other through what can be very, very tough days in Olympia. um and uh I feel really like lucky and grateful that I happened to get elected like at that particular time, and with like incredible people like Chapala Street and Julio Cortez, Emily Alvarado, Joe Timmons, Charlotte Mena, just like Mary Fossey, just a really, really great kind of crew of young legislators that kind of all came in together.
I'm so glad to hear that you're able to connect with those folks and that, you had that sense of camaraderie between each other and, you're able to find some sense of belonging to. I think, like you'd mentioned, being a Black woman in that space, like you weren't really sure what to expect and you were anxious. But I think like having people that you can relate to and talk about what you're experiencing during that time is so important and honestly vital for you to feel like you can survive in some of these systems sometimes. And so I'm, yeah, so glad to hear that you had that.
Yeah.
And just pivoting gears a bit, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your upbringing in Seattle. I know you mentioned that your parents both worked in public service. Your dad was a public school teacher, and your parents moved to Seattle in the 1980s, seeking to settle in a place where their biracial family could thrive in a safe environment. As a Black and biracial Seattle native, how has your upbringing and identity influenced your personal life and career path? And I know you spoke a bit about that already, just about how your parents influenced you. But if you'd like to share any significant moments growing up in Seattle as Black and biracial woman, please feel free.
For sure. I mean, so my parents moved to Seattle in, I want to say 1981 or 1982. And they had met in Maine, which is the whitest state in the union. So, like, the best place to meet your Black husband. Um, that's a whole other story that we can tell on another podcast. And my dad he was born in Alabama and raised in mostly in Dayton, Ohio. My mom's from Eastern Washington, from a large Irish Catholic family in Eastern Washington. And her parents were not excited about her marrying this Black person. And I mean, just to like set the stage, like you have to remember, like Loving v. Virginia was like, I think less than 20 years before my parents got married. So like it was a time of incredible change still in the United States, and at a time when like biracial relationships and especially like Black and white relationships were not like very common. And eventually, my family kind of came to embrace all of us, and things improved, but it was a big shock for my grandparents when my parents got married. And my dad, in addition to being a teacher, is also an artist. He's a painter, and when he met my mom, he was trying to move to a city with a greater art scene. So he was thinking about maybe moving to New Mexico or Seattle, and they decided to move to Seattle because my mom was from Washington State, and it just kind of made more sense. Um, and I grew up in Northeast Seattle, which is a pretty white area thanks to redlining, and was a very white area when I was growing up there. And we were kind of certainly like the only biracial family that I knew in the area, and like one of the only Black families that I knew in the area. And I think that created a few different dynamics that are a little bit interesting. So like growing up, like my parents were very careful to kind of inculcate in me a sense of like Black history and Black identity. So I always joke that like I didn't just have like notable American women paper dolls. I also had notable African American women paper dolls. And like when I wanted a white American girl doll, my parents apparently had like an existential crisis that they had that I should have chosen Addie, the Black doll, and like what had I done wrong? And they did get me Keisha, a different Black doll later, and just like they were very concerned about ensuring that I was kind of that I had these positive identity markers around me. But at the same time, I didn't I wasn't connected to a lot of like actual living Black people. So like I knew a lot about like Ruby Bridges and Althea Gibson and Arthur Ashe, but I didn't have any Black friends in my neighborhood. There were a lot of Black kids at my school because I went to what I guess is now called like an options school, K-8, and a public school, and it was in the 90s, so there used to be a lot of busing in Seattle public schools. So like a lot of the kids that came to my school like came from all over the city, so it was a fairly diverse school, but I certainly didn't have a lot of diversity in my neighborhood, and my parents didn't like. I've talked to some other uh Black friends of mine who grew up in kind of similar settings, and their parents would like put them in Jack and Jill or like put them in other kind of like camps or social organizations where they would connect with other Black folks. And I didn't have that like same connection. My dad's family lived pretty far away, so we didn't see them all that often. And so it was kind of a really interesting dichotomy. Sorry, welcome to my therapy session. Welcome to therapy with Rev Reed.
Um,
Love it.
And a lot about like how do I define myself and like my identity, and defining that kind of a little bit in the absence of like a living community. And it was also like it was the 90s and the early 2000s, so it's like we weren't doing Black Lives Matter then. We were doing kind of like the human race is the race we all belong to. And I kind of definitely went through a period in high school especially, and kind of on into early college, where I was like, if I just don't talk about being Black or think about it or acknowledge it or like try to connect to any organizations, like maybe everyone will just kind of forget that I'm different and I could like just kind of blend in. And so I really like and it makes me sad when I think about it, because I think I really deprived myself of a lot of like deprived myself, like not wasn't deprived by other people, but like deprived myself of a lot of opportunities to like connect to and build community that could have been really nurturing and supportive for me in those kind of complicated teenage years. And a lot of it was I didn't I felt a little bit like there was kind of a certain like Black identity that I didn't feel fully connected to. And I didn't realize at the time that like just because I exist, like I am Black, and whatever identity I hold and that I value is Black identity. And I kind of bought into a little bit of the like of what is like an anti-Black and like self-hating narrative that I think you can get from society or the internet, the early internet or what have you, that I was like, I need to like box this up and just not let anybody know that I'm Black, and like not try to connect and not try to like speak out about this identity, and just try to be like as race neutral as possible. And I, that is was a real like struggle for me to kind of come out of that. And as I like got more into my mid 20s and moved to DC, and things in my life just changed, I started to go to therapy and unbox and stuff. um I came to really appreciate and embrace my Black identity, and to like open up this part of myself and the pride that I have in the legacy that I hold within myself, to let go a little bit too of the kind of respectability politics that was very much a part of my dad's upbringing, and was something that like he kind of inculcated in us, especially I think because we were like the only Black family around. There was a lot of pressure to like behave correctly, show a united front, like, not be emotional, like to be a strong representative, carry the weight of history with you at all times. And that weight can be comforting, but it can also be crushing. And you have to have space to define yourself as yourself. I think about that a lot. There's like an Audre Lorde quote about I had to define myself for myself, or I would be crushed by other people's expectations and definitions of me. That's like a little bit of a paraphrase, but it took me a long time to learn to embrace my own definition and to learn to embrace uh really who I was in totality, and not to kind of be afraid of it or run away from it or think that it was something that I needed to escape or grapple with. And now, like, I have a lot of I love being, I love being Black. I love our beautiful and diverse community. I'm about to marry someone who his parents come from Nigeria. So he's Black in like a totally different way than 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 I was Black. And my dad has been loving it because we go to these like Nigerian parties now where it's like all Nigerians, and my dad's like, wow, like it's so nice to not be the only one in the room anymore.
It's like we're really a diaspora, honestly.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, like the Nigerians are so different.
Right.
And I have to like constantly remind them, I'm like, yes, like, I'm Black, like my dad's Black, but like you have to remember, like when you're talking to my dad, like his Black, like they're very confused that my dad doesn't know like what village his family comes from and what tribe they are. And I'm like, okay, so let's like remember about, centuries of like historical erasure and like family separation and all of these things. And so it's been really it's I feel like I'm in a really beautiful season right now with the wedding coming up, and this opportunity to connect to this totally different community of Africans in America, as well as like being an African American. And so that's been really like fun and exciting.
I love everything you said. There's so much to unpack there, but first off, I just want to thank you for being so honest about how you were able to work through some of that shame you had about being Black. And I, really commend you for opening up about that, particularly growing up in an area like Seattle where there weren't a lot of other Black kids. And like you said, even though, you went to a Black school, like you learned about the history, you still hadn't defined Blackness for yourself. And you had to actually kind of understand that internalized white supremacy to get to that own definition for yourself. And that started with that internal work, like you said, going to therapy and, really uncovering where are some of these messages coming from, or why do I feel this way about myself and my identity? And that's something that we've talked a lot about on this with many other guests. And I myself am biracial. And so just hearing what you shared really resonated with me. I was raised by my white family and like entirely isolated from Black culture. And so I didn't even have like that Black history. I had to go out on my own and learn it. And I also had like minimized that aspect of myself and had assimilated so much like throughout pretty much the entirety of my childhood.
Right.
And I'd been immersed in white spaces, like from the sports I did, and always just in, spaces where no one looks like me. And so I'd be the only. And so like, I completely understand where you felt that feeling like I don't really fit in. And why is that, but it's so beautiful to hear how you've like come out on the other side. And now you're getting to see all the like versatility within our community, and that there's so many like nuanced ways to be Black, and that Black Americans' experiences are so varied from, immigrants that come here, and that there's so much to learn about each other, and that we need to, come together and unify to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so varied, and it's so and there's so much, I think, like in lieu of having kind of like a network of like aunties and folks around me, I love to read, and I was really like some like poet, there's a Black female poet, Lucille Clifton, who's really influential for me, Audre Lorde, like all of kind of the history of like Black feminists and their contributions to writing and books that really started me on that journey of being like, wait, like this is me. Like, I feel myself reflected in this. And this is like, I can now kind of have words and language to express like what this feeling is. And that was really special and important to me.
That's awesome. I want to go back and commend your parents. I think it's amazing that they, made an emphasis on teaching you about Black history and trying to connect you to that side. And I can imagine, growing up in Seattle, you mentioned redlining, which, obviously created racially segregated neighborhoods, how you were disconnected from a lot of Black people and Black culture. And I was wondering if you could speak more to your move to Washington, D.C., and if that impacted you in a significant way, being around more Black people in a more Black city. Because I know, even here in Seattle, sometimes there's more of us now, but I still feel kind of like, I'm a little disconnected, or I feel so siloed. But when I travel to a place like DC, you feel that the warmth of the Black community more. So how did that impact you moving across the country?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I went to college in Massachusetts, in another very white space. And then I do remember like coming to DC and just being like, wow, there are so many Black people
There's
here.
Black people everywhere. Literally, I remember I was a kid when I went there, and I was like, "This is the first time I've ever seen this many Black people in one spot,"
And
and I was
just
shocked.
like, I'm like, they're on the train, they're in the meeting, they're doing this. So it was just like, I was like, wow, like this is kind of all around me. And there's just, and there are also just so many incredible historical moments for Black people that happened in DC. And just like this opportunity to be like, wow, like this is, and it was really very kind of just eye-opening. And then the other thing that was interesting about it too was in DC. So I moved to DC to work in the Obama administrations. I'm working for the first Black president, but it also really struck me, especially when I was working at the State Department. I was like the only Black person in my jobs at the State Department who wasn't like a cleaner or like a secretary, basically like a long-term administrative assistant or like a security guard. Like there weren't a lot of Black people that I interacted with working in policy roles. And I mean, I was a junior staffer, so I don't want to overemphasize like the policy that I was doing, a lot of bag carrying, a lot of printing. But like there weren't a lot of other Black people like in the offices that I was in. And so again, it was kind of this interesting dichotomy of like, I'm in like a much more Black city where there are a lot more Black spaces and Black people, and I'm working for the Black president, but the people that I'm interacting with day to day are not Black. And in fact, the way that some of them treat me is really discriminatory. And I think that was a real kind of like um a real sort of like kind of beginning of like a reawakening and like a repoliticizing of my consciousness after kind of this lull period of like high school and college, where I was just like again trying to be like super race neutral and just really like not talk about it, blend in the background, like just stay away from spaces where I might have to like interact with those feelings. Um and it was really, I think that kind of dichotomy was very jarring and kind of shook something a little bit loose in me. um and I think that it it kind of helped me be like, oh, like if I want to continue in these spaces, especially in this like foreign policy, national security world, which is very male and very white and very like patrician, I would say, like very kind of like Harvard, Yale, like Georgetown club kind of world, I have to create my own identity space and defend it and really lean into that, or else these people are gonna just eat me alive. And that was, I think, a real kind of, it didn't like happen all at once, but I think that was sort of the like starter wake up moment where I was like, something about this doesn't feel right. And I feel that the way that I'm sometimes treated is wrong. And I know that that's connected to this identity that I've kind of been suppressing or trying not to think about for a while. And I think I should explore that more. So you know, I think that was like kind of the beginning of the shift, like the pebble that unlodges and starts to roll downhill, and suddenly you're like, oh, okay. Like, and then, the Trump election happened, and I moved back to Seattle in 2017. And then we had kind of the summer of 2020 and all of the work and kind of things that went into that. So that period was the beginning of a period of like great tumult and change in my life. Do you know tumult is a Yiddish word? Just putting that out there.
I didn't know
I
that,
did
but
not
I
know.
like the word. It was so profound what you just said about how you had noticed there was like this guise of elitism in that space you were in professionally, and that what you did was make a decision, because I think that's kind of the key for many Black folks, particularly when we are in professional spaces. Either you lean into Blackness and your identity, or you decide, let me see how far I can push this by playing the game and ascending in my own career. And oftentimes that leaves the community behind and can ostracize us from who we truly are. And so I just love hearing how you really listen to that inner voice and we're like, I don't think I can do this because it will cripple my soul. Like you said, these people will eat me alive. And, that's really, I think, white supremacy that is pervasive. And so when you're able to understand that and recognize that, you can make that choice for yourself. Like, what am I going to do to now combat this and disrupt the status quo?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And I love that you talked a lot about, working in predominantly white spaces. And, from what I've heard from a lot of my biracial friends and certain experiences is sometimes you walk into a room with Black people and you're not Black enough. And then you walk into a space where you're around a lot of white people and it's very obvious that you're Black. And, kind of that dichotomy, like you said, and just navigating our identity in different spaces, I'd imagine can be challenging depending on the demographics you're around. And you received your Master of Public Administration from Princeton's University School of Public Affairs, which is
Another noted Black institution.
right, right,
HBCU? No.
Yeah.
right, another one. No. So we were wondering if you could dive into that a little more, your experience there, and if you have any advice for those who aspire to achieve a similar feat.
Yeah, I mean, Princeton was a very interesting world in so many ways. Because as a grad student as well, so Princeton as an institution is very focused on their undergraduate population. They have a pretty small graduate school. They don't, unlike Harvard, those losers to the north. They don't have a business school or a law school or a medical school. They don't have any other professional schools besides their public policy school. And they have this very kind of like, you know, in the service of nation, like it's, what is it? It was like in the service of the nation and in the service of all nations, or anyway, it's very much like they're like, we are Princeton men and we're going out in the world to like, use our elite skills to like lead the nations in the nation's service and in the service of all nations. That was their motto. And so and they have big military presence on campus, like a lot of ROTC stuff. And so I went there mostly because, and this is like a good tip for anyone who's considering an MPA, if you get accepted to Princeton, you get a full tuition scholarship and a living stipend from the university. So essentially you can get your master's degree for free. They don't take very many people, but it is worth applying, because if you get in, it's like winning the master's degree lottery.
I wish I knew that.
I got
That's
into a
fabulous.
I got into a lot of great master's degree programs. But I went and visited them, and I was like, I like this, but do I have $40,000 a year like this? Like, I don't think I like anything for $40,000 a year. So that was largely why I decided to go to Princeton. It was obviously a reputational decision. It's like, oh, you go to Princeton's really great. But a lot of it was a financial decision. And Princeton itself has just such an interesting racial history. It's home to Paul Robeson, who was a famous actor and activist, Black actor and activist. And his family has a really interesting like activist history with the university specifically, where his brother like was admitted and then like unenrolled because of his race. And like Princeton of all of the Ivies is kind of seen as like the Southern man's Ivy, and that's like was its history for a long time. So it has a lot of like weird kind of racial stuff roiling under the surface. But it's also where Toni Morrison taught and Einstein, and like there's all this like it's a very interesting kind of place. So it was a really interesting place to be for the Trump election the first time. But yeah, so I left DC thinking I was going to come back, and like I maintained a really close relationship to all my folks in DC. I also spent a lot of time in New York when I was at Princeton. It's pretty close to New York City, which again is like another experience where it's like not just like wow, there are so many Black people here, but just like wow, there are so many like different types of people here, and everyone here is like engaged in some experience of like self-definition in this like crazy way. Whereas in DC, like people are very like, we work for the government, we're very regimented, we all shop at Ann Taylor, like we all dress the same. Like it's very like there's like an aesthetic, and New York, I think things are a lot more varied and just a lot more diverse, and so that was really special. And I think when I was at Princeton, honestly, that's when I first went to therapy. And I went to therapy at the Student Health Center because that was my second year and I just didn't feel good. Like everything in my life on paper was like banging. Like I was, you know, I'm a Princeton student, I'm head of the student government, I'm doing great in my classes, I'm blah, blah, I'm this, I'm that. Like I was doing all of these things and I was keeping myself so busy to like be like, oh, I can just outrun the fact that like actually I'm not feeling well and I have all of these doubts and anxieties, and I don't feel like I have a close like any close friends here, and I feel like, you know, people want me around when there's something to be organized or run because I'm really good at that, but like I'm not the person getting invited to like the party or like the weekend home, or and I had all of this like personal social anxiety, and I was like maybe I should try this like student health center. And I remember after coming out of my first therapy session, I was like, wait, you guys have been doing this all along and nobody told me?
You're like, I should have come here earlier. I've been
Oh
having
my God, I
issues for
should
a
have
while.
there. Like, honestly, the best thing about grad school is it gives you a lot of time to go to therapy.
Good. I'm so glad that they
Um,
had that resource for you.
yeah, but it was huge for me. And so that really like I only went a few times because, you know, student healthcare scheduling is complicated, but it kind of started me on this journey of like, oh, like again, like something is could be better. And I think I always felt like, oh, like mental health care or therapy or what have you is for like people that are really like sick or crazy or like unhappy and like depressed. And I'm like, that's not me. Like I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything is fine. Like I don't I'm fine. And I think being able to like realize like actually like, you know, mental stress and being and like mental health care can be for everyone. And you know, you don't have to wait until you're kind of in a moment of crisis to get support and to reach out and to like have help and care and to, you know, improve that part of yourself. Just like, you know, you go to the gym regularly. And I often talk to like when I talk to people who are considering running for office, especially people of color, my big advice that I give them is, you know, you really have to have a very solid plan for how you're going to take care of your mental, your physical, and your spiritual health in this process. Because running for office is very mentally and physically stressful. And it also can be very spiritually challenging where you have a lot of people trying to tell you what you should be, what you should say, how you need to show up in spaces, you know, what the consequences are going to be for XYZ action. And you have to have like a really good sense of yourself and be able to hold on to that throughout this like kind of washing machine that you're being tossed around in. And so I think that's where like spiritual healthcare, you know, for me, I mentioned earlier, like I'm a Catholic, I go to church, I pray, like that's really that those spaces are very important to me. And like throughout my campaign, like I made sure to go to mass every single week because I needed that space for reflection and that space to sort of just be in a place where nobody was demanding anything of me, and where, you know, I was fully known to God and and I understood like what I needed to do for that hour, and I could just kind of relax into that. And you know, mental health care being the same, like having, you know, really thinking about that before you decide to run for office, like really spending time getting to know yourself and like your values and who you are, and exploring kind of the parts of yourself that are painful and the parts of yourself that you love. And that can be through therapy. There can be lots of ways to do that, but you know, that is, I think, really important. And then, you know, physical health care, like being able to go to the gym, like get out of your mind and into your body is so important too in those spaces. And I think it took me a long time in my life to realize the power of those like three like pieces. And it's still a work in progress. I'm not perfect. There's definitely Sunday mornings I wake up and I'm like, oh, I think I'm just gonna sleep in today.
Right.
And that's
And
okay. Sometimes that's what you need in that
yes,
moment.
exactly. The ancestors are calling us to rest.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes,
Right.
lay down.
That
Get your
is
8 hours.
People are always like, what are you doing for Juneteenth? And I was like, I am honoring my ancestors by doing the one thing they could not do, which is rest.
Exactly.
And so, you know, it's you don't have to be like perfect and have everything locked in, but I think those three elements are really really important pieces if you're running for office, if you're looking for a job, wherever your life is taking you. I think if you kind of have those if you focus on those three things and caring for yourself in those ways, like, you know, you're going to at least be grounded and be able to make decisions from a place of abundance and not a place of like fear and anxiety.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that you touched on the importance of your mental, physical, and spiritual health, and how a lot of those things can help you stay grounded during times when you're stressed or things are uncertain. And I really love that you also mentioned that, you know, therapy is for everybody. You don't necessarily need to be in a time of crisis or have a particular like mental health diagnosis to engage in therapy because, like you said, we're all works in progress and we're all
Absolutely.
impacted by our upbringings. And I don't want to like put words in your mouth.
Absolutely. And it can allow you to just open up space for so many beautiful things to happen. And you know, I think that is sometimes you just don't realize how like tightly you're clenching your jaw or your fist until you have an opportunity to like lay that burden down and breathe for a second. And I think especially for Black people, because of all of the pressures that we face, like from our own communities, from white supremacy, from just like trying to exist and survive in this world, giving yourself space to have ease and to set that burden down for a while and really kind of check in with who you are at the core is so can be really transformative. It certainly was for me.
That's so great. And I also just really appreciate that you talked about, you know, how going to therapy or even just engaging in self-care practices, that should just be looked at as taking care of yourself holistically.
Yeah.
Not there should not be a stigma on that, and you don't need to be in crisis. You know, that doesn't mean anything's wrong with you necessarily because you want to check in with yourself mentally. And so I'm, you know, so glad that people are now speaking up about that more too, and people in positions of power, you know, and people that are working these very demanding jobs and they're like, hey, like some days I'm not feeling great. And on the outside, it looks great. Looks like I've achieved so much, but like sometimes I don't feel my best and I need to talk about it with people and yeah, reflect. So that's great. And pivoting a little bit just about your current work in the legislature, your primary focus is on post-secondary education access, housing, and inclusionary urban zoning, also supporting the arts and the creative economy. Can you share why these issues are important to you? I know you already spoke a bit about this with the arts and stuff, but yeah, if like you have a personal connection to those, please feel free to dive into that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think with the post-secondary education workforce, I feel, you know, I had so many blessings and privileges when it came to my access to college education, that I'm really aware of that were such gifts to me. And um, a lot of people don't have that support and don't have those opportunities, and really like don't even believe that it's worth like trying to look into it. Like don't feel that they're in some way like worthy or connected. And I think I just everyone you meet in Washington, there are so many young people that just have, and adults who have, they just have so much potential. They have so much to give. There's so much they want to do. And again, it's kind of like that um that opportunity to sort of just like open up just make things just a little bit easier for them, and then they will take it the rest of the way. I think that people, I generally tend to believe that like people know what's best for them and can be trusted to make their own decisions about their own lives. um but they need oftentimes everybody needs a little bit of help, and I think that that is where, and our system, our education system, and particularly when it comes to transitioning from high school to a post-secondary education, whether that's college, apprenticeships, some other kind of training program, even the military, there's not these like there's a lot of challenges and barriers that are thrown up by well-meaning but I think misguided actors in the system, and a lot of kind of like sort of acceptance of status quo. And I think that there is a real opportunity to change that and make our ensure that in our state the post-secondary education system is a ladder to economic mobility for as many people as possible. And right now we're just not there, and that's bad for the state's economy, but it's mostly bad for like the individual people and the communities that they live in whose potential is not given a chance to thrive. And so I that's something that I really feel I've always really felt passionate about working on, and I see it as an area where state government can really make a huge difference. And then housing, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but a big reason why I ran is I just didn't feel like there were enough people in the legislature who understood like what housing is like for people my age. I'm 38 now, and I was 35 when I got elected. Um, you know, for people my age and younger. There are a lot of people in legislature, again, like they're well-meaning, they care, but they bought homes like in the 90s and when stuff was a lot cheaper and median income was a lot closer to medium home price. And they just like it's hard for them to understand, to really grasp what that is like. Like they haven't looked for an apartment in the market since they bought their house in the 90s. They've just been paying their 1990s mortgage. And so it's the urgency that they bring to some of these housing decisions is different than the urgency that me and folks in my generation bring. And I wanted to be a part of contributing to that shift. And for the arts, I mean, this kind of ties back into what I was talking about earlier, but I was a big theater kid in school and in high school. And, I was really lucky to be able to go to camps at Seattle Children's Theater and to go to a school that had a kind of a strong arts program. And I really feel like that saved my life. That I was very depressed, especially as a middle schooler. And, having an opportunity in a space for expression and self-definition was really life sustaining for me. And I really feel strongly about, and my dad is, I mentioned, he always had another job, but his primary identity, I think he would say, is being an artist. Um, and my parents even ran like an art magazine out of our basement for a little while when I was very little. I don't really remember this that well, but they tell me about it.
That's so cool. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it was a
Wow.
short-lived
Yeah.
enterprise, but like
It's not lucrative at all. So
they ran it, and got to meet some like really cool like Northwest artists like through that work. And so the it's very important to me that creative pursuits can be a viable job and career path for people in our state, and that our creative economy, which has an economic multiplier effect for so many communities. If you go to a show or theater, you're also buying dinner, you're paying for parking, you're paying ticket taxes. Like and you're being part of this like kind of community galvanizing and like community pride centering event. And I think that it's, in order to have those things, we have to make it possible for the arts to function. We have to make it possible for artists to get paid. We have to have we have to preserve rehearsal and performance spaces. We have to make it possible for shows and festivals to happen. And so, you know, I just, again, it comes mostly from a place of like knowing how critical that was for me, and how the arts ecosystem, especially nowadays with kind of where we are federally, um, really is, it's very important that there are people that protect and support it, and help support a healthy ecosystem so that the arts can be viable businesses and viable career paths in our state. And so that's why I focus on those areas in particular.
I love that. Thank you so much for explaining. And I feel like a good theme in that is that you really lead with your values. You want people to reach their fullest potential, whether that's, through education or even creating or pursuing their creative endeavors and their creative passions. All of those things, contribute to a greater society. And I really appreciate that. And you've proven to be a community centered public official. You've continued to volunteer on various boards and showing up in the community to advocate for human rights and upholding democracy. And you've emphasized that your parents instilled the importance of public service and empathy in you from an early age. We were wondering, at a time where politics has become more polarized, can you describe the importance of centering empathy in public service and your plans to model this approach in this work?
Oh, I don't know if I have a grand plan to model it per se, but I
Hey,
think,
we're just
empathy is
trucking
really
along.
important. And we talked about this a little bit in the space of identity, but one of the things about, I think, as a biracial person, like I'm always really drawn to like what happens where at like the juncture of things, or the creases of things, like where kind of two things meet. There's always like some space in the middle that isn't like fully, this is a very extended metaphor, but isn't like kind of fully joined, and where there's a lot of overlap, and the story is not neat and perfect. And I find that to be a really interesting place to work. It's one of the things that drew me to working on the Israel-Palestine issue when I was younger. And is that, in that part of the world, there are so many overlapping narratives and truths, and that are all to a certain extent true at the same time, and are kind of always sort of fighting with each other, and like have deep historical layers. So it's a very complex universe. And I think that I am drawn to that kind of complexity. And I think the empathy part comes also from kind of feeling like being on the outside of things a lot of the time, like whether that's because I'm biracial, or because I'm have a bigger body, or because I'm female, or just because of the environment I grew up in. Like, I know what it feels like to be on the outside looking in, and to feel like you're a little bit alienated from the main group and situation. And so I think that gives me like a certain amount of heart and attention that I pay to others that feel that way, or a certain amount of like attentive, like emotional attunement to kind of what's going on around me and how other people are feeling. Um, and I think that, it's really important to remember that no one is the villain of their own story. And like, however frustrating or challenging like a particular person might be, if you're trying to work something out in the legislature, like they are coming to this with their own motivations and their own reasons. And if you can try to understand that, you might be able to unlock like some ability for them to like work with you, or for you to work together. And very few people are moving through life just trying to be like fully evil people. Like most people think that they are good people and they are doing good, and whether or not that's objectively true. And I think it pays off to try to spend some time understanding like why people do certain things and what their motivations are.
You put it perfectly. And I just think it's so important that we have people like you in these positions because of what you mentioned about, how your own identity as a biracial woman has helped you understand, like, what's the thought process that happens for some of these people when they do come to making these certain policy decisions, or what is their worldview. And I think, if we start to really dive into that more and really decode how people come to some of their processes, I think that we will be more effective in incorporating empathy into the work that we do. And so, yeah, I really just love how you shared that, and that, these are complex issues, and that hopefully most people are not going around the world trying to be, vindictive or evil, as you said, or moving with a vengeance.
Very few mustache twirling villains out there.
Yeah. And I'm optimistic too. And I'm like, I don't think all these people really, wholeheartedly believe this, or they're not perceiving as what they're saying is being racist or, being discriminatory. But that it's important that we actually connect with each other so that we can share, our own thoughts, and hopefully they will receive some of that and it will help inform how they move forward. But yeah, just moving forward a bit in your time at the Washington State Legislature. I know we're getting to the end of the interview, but as of 2025, nearly 10% of members in the Washington State Legislature, are Black, which is actually more than I thought. So I'm glad to see that. But having broken the glass ceiling of being the first in the 36th legislative district, what advice do you have for those who you will eventually pass the torch to?
Oh man. Yeah, we are the largest legislative Black caucus in the West.
That's actually wild.
So eat it, California.
Cool. Yes. I'm so happy to hear it.
And yeah, it is wild. And I think it's also very interesting because the Black legislator, like, we talk about Blackness not being a monolith. Like, man, the legislative Black caucus is a lot of very different people.
I love that.
They are all Democrats, but they are all different types of Democrats. And it is a really interesting, and they come from all different generations and backgrounds. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting collection of folks. I love the LBC, but the meetings are always, I'm like, man, this is welcome to the diverse beauty of the Black community here on full display. I would say, okay, what advice do I have to people coming after me? I think we've talked a lot about self-definition in this conversation, and I think I'll just maybe return to that theme, that the most important thing at the end of the day is your definition of and understanding of yourself. It is not what your community says about you. It is not what the world at large says about you. It is not what culture says about you. It is you are the one. At the end of the day, you close your eyes and really all you have is what is between your ears. And your respect for yourself, your definition of your own values and kind of what you do and don't want to stand for, your own like moral code and, self-assessment. Like, at the end of the day, that is what matters. And if you can have a strong sense of who you are at the core and really hold on to that, then everything else becomes manageable. And that is, I think, the biggest thing I would tell someone coming after me is that really try to cultivate within yourself. And it's a work in progress. There's not like a moment where you're like, I have completed my self-definition journey. But like really cultivating and putting the effort into thinking about like, who do you want to be and how do you want to show up in spaces and why do you want to be that way? And partially I think it's because voters really respond to people that operate, I think, from a place of authentic visioning and values, even if they don't agree with you on every vote that you take, even if they don't, they're not like 100% with you. Like, voters want people that have authentic vision and are values driven. And I think you see like the dark side of that with the Trump election. And I think I see a lot of too many legislators kind of trying to like chase the poll or try to carve out the position where it's like, oh, this feels like the safest position. No one can like assail me from here. Or like, this person that I just had coffee with told me this. So now I need to like completely change my direction because I got this feedback. And I think it is important to listen to your voters. It is important to understand what they need and where they're coming from. But also, like, your voters are looking to you to articulate and act in a values driven way. And if you do that, I have found that they respond with with respect and support, even if you're doing something that's different than what they just wrote in. So like, if I get an email from someone that's like, I want you to do this thing, and I'm like, I disagree, and like, here's why, and I'm sorry that we're not aligned, but like, this is what I believe is the right thing to do, so this is what I'm going to do. And, I think if you do that, like, not only do voters respond to that well, but also like, even if they don't respond to that well and you lose your seat and get kicked out of office, like, you are still yourself at the end of the day. And that is something that is really powerful and special that you can always hold on to. Sometimes I find it helpful. I think some people find this a little bit morbid, but like, on the second floor of the legislative building, the third floor, right above the legislative chamber, there's a bunch of offices kind of in these back hallways, and all along those hallways are photos of of legislative classes, like going all the way back to like the first territorial legislature in 18 I don't remember the date, but 1880 something. And sometimes I really actually enjoy like looking at all of those old photos, because it really reminds me, like, all of these people thought they were the shit. like all of these people from like 1928 were just like, I'm a state legislator and I made it and I am doing it. And like, now they're just pictures on a wall. And honestly, like, nobody remembers their name. Nobody remembers like what they did or contributed. And one day, I'll be a picture on the wall too, and someone will be staring and be like, huh, wonder what she was like. And so I find that I do that a lot when I'm there, and I find it to be very grounding, because I'm just like, like, this work is important, but it will pass away. And this phase of my life, I don't think I'm going to be a legislator forever. So this phase will end, but I will still be me, and I will still have to live with my choices and my decisions and, my definition of myself when this job passes over. And that is why I'm really strong and committed to this idea of like, how do you cultivate your own self-definition and support that? Because, as proud as I am to be a legislator and serve this district and do this work, and as much as I'm proud to have achieved this, I know that this is one day I'll be a photo on that wall. And I want to, in the meantime, be proud of the person that I am.
Thank
That's
you.
so beautiful. Yes, thank you so much. And also, it's just, so empowering to hear that you don't acquiesce to the pressure. Like you said, you know who you are, you know what your core values are, and you're not willing to compromise those simply for the sake of getting ahead. And so I think that's invaluable advice that hopefully our listeners will take as they start carving out their own journeys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just really love that you mentioned, you get feedback from folks and then you say, hey, this is what I believe and this is why I disagree with you. And you explain yourself. I echo what Tiana said. I feel like a lot of politicians can be malleable at times and kind of bend to what others want and not stand firm in what they believe in. And then with that brings mistrust, because the people are like, what do you actually stand for? And so
Mm-hmm.
I love that you are clear and explicit about what you stand for, and that you're still open and receptive, and of course want to listen to what your constituents have to say and hold that valuable, but that you remain true to your values. I think that's very important for everyone who works in public service.
Yeah.
And yes, and so we want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been amazing and so insightful, and honestly one of my most favorite conversations, and I know that our listeners are going to love this. And
We're not just saying that. It actually has been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we ask everyone this question, and I think it's amazing because you touched a lot on your identity and kind of that process of becoming confident in yourself and your identity. And so we ask everyone, what does Blackness mean to you? Based on your own lived experience.
Mhm. I think Blackness to me means resilience. It means joy and creativity. Um, it's beautiful. It it also, there are elements of it for me personally that can be painful, but not because of being Black per se, but just like kind of in that sense of like pain that you like experience but overcome, like kind of understanding kind of pain that is part of my family story, and that they have carried, and that impacts, um that's part of it too. But I think that's something to embrace, not run away from. And I think it is Blackness to me is this wonderful, unfolding, rich story of resilience and thriving in the face of, you know, challenges that might have crushed other people. And I think that I just take so much joy and pride, um, in being Black, in the story of my Black family, and in the Black story that each and every one of us as Black people is writing today, and creating today. And that's what it means to me. I think that that sense of resilience and joy, um, is so important.
Thank you so much again for your time and just for sharing so many details from your journey. You were so personable. And as Brad said, this is one of my favorite conversations. And I will also admit I was a bit apprehensive to have someone in politics on this podcast. You are the first person in, that industry that we've had on.
Oh,
And it's been really amazing just to hear about, how authentic you are and how engaged you really are with the community too. And so I hope some of our listeners will be interested in making a change in that
yes,
way in their
we need you.
futures, and you'll be the inspiration for them. Brad, any
Yeah.
last words?
Yeah, I just want to thank you again for your time. I know you're super busy. We kind of discussed this before, we started recording, but like you said, a lot of people think, oh, politicians just, they're in the legislature and that's that. But you have your day job, you're volunteering, you still have work to do. And so we know you're incredibly busy, and we just really appreciate your time today.
I am happy to make time. Thank you guys for having this awesome podcast and platform to
thank
talk
you.
about these issues. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Seriously.
Happy to do it. Live to serve.
Yes. All right. We'll talk
right.
to you soon. Have a good one.
See you
Enjoy your day.
later. Bye.
Bye.
We deeply appreciate your support as we work to uplift the Black community and explore our unique experiences within the Black diaspora on Identity Unboxed.
Authenticity is your guide to cast an impact on the world that you will be proud of. Signing off with pride, Tiana
And Brad.
Thank you so much.